Hi everyone, Mrs. Below here. In this video, I'm going to be going over scientific measurements, specifically significant figures. But before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about percent error. This is something that you will do a lot in labs, and essentially it is how accurate you are in a lab comparing your experimental data to the actual accepted data. Let's say when we get to gas laws, a constant, we call it R, is 0.0821. So you will do a lab, calculate that value, and then compare it to that actual value. So essentially you take your experimental value, so this is what you got in the experiment, minus the accepted value. So this is what it actually is. You take the absolute value of that, so just the difference between those two numbers, and then you divide it by the accepted value or the actual value, and then you multiply it by 100. So usually the lower you get, that is good. The higher you get, that's usually pretty bad. If it is over 100, then you probably did something wrong, like really wrong. And again, this is something you will be doing in lab. The main focus of this video is significant figures. I also abbreviate this sometimes as sig figs, and essentially it is it consists of digits or numbers known with certainty plus one digit of uncertainty. So when you're making measurements, there's only so far you can go in terms of how accurate you can be. So for example, I'm going to go back up here. We already did this, but let's go here. So here I have a graduated cylinder, and I know for sure if this is 10 right here, this right here is 11, this right here is 12. So I know for sure that, and then this is 13. So I know for sure 12. I know for sure it's in between 12 and 13. So I know it has to be at least 12 milliliters. And then I can go one decimal of uncertainty. So 0.5, because in between here, there has to be some type of uncertainty or estimating that value. And this number right here, this would actually be 3 significant figures. So oftentimes in class, we're going to tell you how many significant figures to write your answer to. Here are the rules for significant figures in terms of how to count them. However, you can look at this. This can be a very helpful resource, but I'm going to teach you a really easy trick, I guess, for counting significant figures. I myself use this little kind of shortcut all the time. And here it is. So imagine your number is here, and it's the United States. Well, to the right here, on the East Coast, we have the Atlantic Ocean. And then to the left here on the West Coast, we have the Pacific Ocean. So what I remember is, we're just going to start with count. Later, you're going to be writing your own numbers and values using significant figures. But before we get to that, you have to learn how to count them. So when it comes to counting significant figures, I always remember Atlantic absent, Pacific present. So what does that mean? If you have a number and there is no decimal, the decimal is absent. You're going to start on the right-hand side of that number, and you're going to move towards that number. And the first number you come across, the first non-zero number, so the first number that is not 0, you count that number as significant and everything after it as significant. Versus if you have a decimal point present, you see a decimal in the number, you're going to start on the left-hand side of the number. You're going to move towards the number, and the first number that you come across that is not a 0, so first non-zero number, you count that as significant and everything after that as significant. So let me show you how to use this memory tool. Again, Atlantic, absent, Pacific, present. Hi everyone, I'm just going to be going over some practice problems here. Hold on, I have 2 of these open at the same time. Pause. How did that happen? There we go. What the heck? Okay, sorry, I was having technical difficulties. Okay, so now I'm going to go over some practice problems with you. So I'm going to do the first 2 problems, and then after I get through those 2 problems, after these 2, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to try these 3 on your own, and then continue the video to see how you did. Alright, so number 1. I can see that there's no decimal present, okay? I'm just going to write A for absent or Atlantic. So that means if this number is the United States, I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to move towards that number. The first number that I come across that is not a 0, I'm going to count that as significant and everything else after it as significant. So if I'm moving towards this number, the first number I come across that is not a 0 is the 4. So I'm going to count that as a significant number, this as significant. I'm just going to do this to count how many significant figures. So this is 4 significant figures. Okay, because again, the first number I came across that was not a 0 was this 4 here. So I count that as significant and everything else after it as significant. So this has 4 significant figures. Next problem. I can see that the decimal is present. Again, this had no decimal. So P, Pacific, present. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side here. Again, if the number is the United States, we're starting on the left-hand side where the Pacific Ocean is, and we're moving towards that number. Notice I'm moving past these zeros because you're going to count starting at the first number that is not 0. In this case, it would be this 2. So I would count this 2 and this 3 as both significant, and this would only be 2 significant figures. Again, you're moving towards the number. The first number that you come across that is not a 0, which is the 2, you count that as significant, and everything as significant after that. So go ahead and pause this video and then see if you can do these 3 problems on your own, and then unpause the video to check your work. Alright, so hopefully you've done those 3 problems, so I'm going to go ahead and go over them. So this one, there is no decimal. So Atlantic, absent. So I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to move towards the number. The first number that I come across that is not 0 is the 9. So I'm counting the 9, and everything after that as significant. That would be 2 significant figures. Number 4 here, there is a decimal present. So P for Pacific for present. So I'm starting on the left-hand side, and I'm moving towards that number. The first number I come across that is not 0 is the 9. So I count that and everything after that, including other zeros, as significant. So that might have been a tough one there. You still count these zeros as significant. You're basically figuring out what number do you need to start counting at. That's your goal. And then you count everything after that as significant. So this one actually has 5 significant figures. The last one here, there is no decimal present. So A for Atlantic, absent. So we're starting on the Atlantic side. Again, if this is the number, this is the United States. We're starting on the side where the Atlantic Ocean is. The first number I come across that is not 0 is this 3. So I start counting there, and I count everything after that as significant. So this would be 4 significant figures.